What if I told you that there is a kind of love that makes no sense? The kind that pursues when it has every right to walk away. The kind that pays a price it didn't owe. The kind that is impossible to understand until you've seen it for yourself. For generations, Israel had been chasing other gods, running from the one who had carried them out of Egypt with a mighty hand, the one who had fed them, driven out their enemies, and settled them in a land flowing with milk and honey. They had taken his gifts and credited them to idols of wood and stone. They had broken the covenant, the sacred marriage bond sealed at Sinai, again and again and again. And God was not indifferent. He was a husband, grieving, faithful, and still impossibly, relentlessly in love. So he did something no one expected. He found a prophet named Hosea, and what he asked of him meant one thing: I want you to feel what I feel. This isn't just any love story that ends neatly. This is the story about betrayal, hurt, and about a husband who still wanted his wife, even after she had given herself to others. This is the true biblical story of Hosea and Gomer, and of a God who is faithful even when we are not. To understand the story of Hosea and Gomer, one must first understand the world into which God called this prophet. It was the 8th century before Christ, approximately 750 to 720 BC, and the northern kingdom of Israel was in a state of profound spiritual and moral collapse. On the surface, the nation appeared prosperous. Under King Jeroboam II, Israel had experienced a period of economic expansion, territorial growth, and relative military security. The markets of Samaria were full. The wealthy built houses of hewn stone and lay on beds of ivory. Wine flowed freely, and the sound of music filled the great houses of the elite. But beneath the glittering surface, the nation was rotting from within. The people of Israel had abandoned the God who had brought them out of Egypt. They had turned instead to the Baals, the fertility gods of Canaan, and to the golden calves that Jeroboam I had erected generations before. They burned incense on the high places. They participated in the ritual prostitution of the Canaanite shrines, believing that by lying with the cult prostitutes, they were ensuring the fertility of their crops and livestock. The priests had become corrupt. The prophets had become silent or complicit. The kings rose and fell by assassination. In the final years of the northern kingdom, Israel would cycle through 6 kings in just over 2 decades, 4 of whom were murdered by their successors. The covenant between God and his people, that sacred marriage bond established at Sinai, had been shattered. Israel had become, in the language of the prophets, an adulterous wife. It was into this broken world that God spoke to a man named Hosea, son of Beeri. And what God asked of him would be unlike anything he had ever asked of a prophet before. The word of the Lord came to Hosea.
Go, take for yourself a wife of whoredom and have children of whoredom, for the land commits great whoredom by forsaking the Lord.
In other words, go, marry a promiscuous woman. This command would have shocked anyone who heard it. Prophets were meant to be examples of righteousness, yet here, God was asking Hosea to marry a woman who would be unfaithful. Her name was Gomer, the daughter of Diblaim. We know almost nothing about Gomer's background beyond what the text implies. Whether Gomer was already a practicing prostitute when Hosea married her, or whether she was a woman with a reputation for promiscuity who would later fall into unfaithfulness, the text makes clear that God knew exactly who she was and what she would do. And he told Hosea to marry her anyway. Hosea was a prophet who feared God, who knew the law of Moses, who understood the covenant. He knew what it meant to marry a woman of ill repute. He knew the social stigma, the whispers of neighbors. the shame that would attach itself to his name and to his household. And yet, because the Lord commanded it, Hosea obeyed and went and took Gomer and married her. And in that moment, Hosea's life would become a living, breathing illustration of God's relationship with Israel. Gomer conceived and bore Hosea a son. And the Lord said to Hosea,
Call his name Jezreel,
which meant God scattered. This name was not random, it was prophetic, particularly recalling the bloodshed in the valley of Jezreel. There Jehu destroyed the house of Ahab in a violent purge. Kings were struck down, Jezebel was killed, and Ahab's family was wiped out. Now God was saying, I have not forgotten the bloodshed, and I have not overlooked Israel's idolatry. The name was a warning. Judgment was coming. Then Gomer had a daughter. This time, the text grows quieter. It does not say the child was Hosea's. It simply says Gomer bore a daughter. God said to name her Lo-Ruhamah, meaning not loved, a name that declared that God would withdraw his compassion from Israel. He would no longer show mercy to the house of Israel. He would not forgive them. Then came another son. His name was Lo-Ami, meaning not my people. And God spoke through this name, the most devastating declaration in the entire book.
You are not my people, and I am not your God.
The covenant formula, I will be your God, and you will be my people, was being inverted and reversed. 3 children, 3 names like open wounds, scattered, unloved, not mine. As time passed, the reality of God's command became painfully clear. Gomer did not remain faithful. She wandered. She chased other lovers. The text of Hosea chapter 2 shifts into a poetic address, God speaking to Israel. But the imagery is so tightly woven with Hosea's personal experience that the two are inseparable. The husband speaks to the children about their mother. The Lord speaks to Israel about her unfaithfulness. The voices merge.
Plead with your mother, plead, for she is not my wife, and I am not her husband, that she put away her whoring from her face, and her adultery from between her breasts.
Gomer had left Hosea. She had gone after her lovers, men who gave her bread and water, wool and flax, oil and drink. She had attributed to them the gifts that had actually come from her husband. She had forgotten or refused to acknowledge that it was Hosea who had provided for her, who had lavished silver and gold upon her. This is the precise accusation God levels against Israel. Hosea could have divorced her. The law allowed it. He could have written her a certificate of divorce and been done with it, and no one would have blamed him. His neighbors would have nodded sympathetically. His fellow prophets would have understood. He had done nothing wrong, but God would not let him go. God said to Hosea,
She doesn't realize.
and Hosea understood that God was no longer talking only about Gomer. He was talking about Israel. Gomer represented Israel. The harvests, the rain, the land flowing with milk and honey, all of it had come from Yahweh. And Israel had looked at the Baals and said, "Thank you." They had taken the silver and gold God had given them and used it to make an idol of Baal. So God declared what he would do. He would make her road hard. Every path she ran down would close in on her, thorn after thorn, wall after wall. She would chase the lovers she trusted, but never catch them. She would search for the life she thought they promised, but it would keep slipping through her hands. And when everything she ran to left her empty, she would finally say,
I will go back to my first husband, for I was better off then than now.
and then In one of the most breathtaking reversals in all of Scripture, God spoke of what he would do when she came back.
Therefore, behold, I will allure her and bring her into the wilderness and speak tenderly to her.
He would lead her away from the noise, away from the idols, away from every false promise, and meet her in the wilderness. There, where everything else had been stripped away, she would hear his voice again, and he would begin again. And there I will give her her vineyards, and make the valley of Achor a door of hope. And there she shall answer as in the days of her youth, as at the time when she came out of the land of Egypt. The valley of Achor, where judgment had fallen after the conquest of Jericho, would become the place of new beginning, and the relationship that had been broken by betrayal would not stay broken forever. For God said,
And in that day you will call me my husband, and no longer will you call me my Baal.
The months that followed were the loneliest of Hosea's life. He raised the children. He continued to prophesy. When he stood in the streets of Samaria and cried out about Israel's unfaithfulness, people could see it in his face. His words now carried a weight they hadn't before, the weight of experience. This was a man who knew what betrayal tasted like. He heard rumors about Gomer from time to time. She was with this man, then that one. She was living well for a while, presumably nice clothes, good food, laughing in the market, her hand resting easy in some wealthy man's arm. Men who opened their wallets and their doors to her, and who promised the world and delivered just enough to keep her hooked. Then not so well. The laughter faded. The fabrics got sold. The wealthy man was gone. The men who had seemed so glamorous, so generous, so much more exciting than a prophet, they turned out to be exactly what they were, users. Men who wanted what she offered and gave nothing lasting in return. And then the word of the Lord came to Hosea again.
Go again,
God said.
Love her as the Lord loves Israel, even though they have turned to other gods.
Again, not move on, not find someone better, but again. So Hosea went to find his wife. What he found was not what he expected. Gomer was being sold. He found her at the slave market or something very close to it. She had fallen so far through so many men and so many bad decisions that she had ended up here, a woman being auctioned off like livestock and her value reduced to a number. Hosea looked at her across the crowd. She looked nothing like the woman who had left him. She didn't resemble the beloved wife he had married, but he still loved her anyway. He paid for her. 15 shekels of silver and a homer and a lethech of barley, half the price of a common slave, made up partly in grain because he didn't have enough silver. He paid with what he had, and he bought back his own wife. When it was done, when the transaction was complete, and she stood before him, he spoke to her quietly.
You are coming home with me, and you are going to stay. No more running, no more other men. I am going to be faithful to you, and you are going to learn what that means, and we are going to start again.
He didn't shout. He didn't demand an explanation. He didn't list her failures. He made a new covenant. There would be a season of waiting, a time of restoration, of healing, of rebuilding what had been broken. And Hosea, for his part, would also wait. He would not take another woman. He would be faithful to her, even as he called her to faithfulness. And then God spoke the words that no one expected. He reversed the names. And in the place where it was said to them, "You are not my people," it shall be said to them, "Children of the living God." Lo Ami, not my people, would become Ami, my people. Lo Ruhama, not loved, would become Ruhama, loved. And Jezreel, the name of scattering, would be transformed.
I will sow her for myself in the land.
The same root word that gave Jezreel its name of judgment would now speak of planting, of new growth, and of a harvest of restoration. The children born in sorrow would be renamed in joy. The book of Hosea closes not with judgment, but with an invitation. Return, O Israel, to the Lord your God, for you have stumbled because of your iniquity. Take with you words and return to the Lord. And God's response when we do return, I will heal their apostasy. I will love them freely, for my anger has turned from them. I will be like the dew to Israel. The nation that had been stripped bare by its own unfaithfulness would bloom again. The marriage that had been broken would be restored. The wife who had wandered would come home, and the husband who had never stopped loving her would receive her with the free, overflowing, healing love that had always been his nature. I will betroth you to me forever, in righteousness and in justice, in steadfast love and in mercy, in faithfulness, and you shall know the Lord. Throughout the book of Hosea, we see how relentless and strong God's love is. He speaks as a husband who is genuinely, deeply, painfully in love with a wife who has broken his heart.
How can I give you up, O Ephraim? How can I hand you over, O Israel? My heart recoils within me, my compassion grows warm and tender.
Here is the crucial distinction. A human husband, betrayed as Hosea was betrayed, might eventually reach the end of his capacity for forgiveness. Human love has limits. Human patience runs out. Human hearts grow hard with repeated wounding. But God is not a man. His love does not diminish with betrayal. It does not calcify with rejection. It does not eventually give up and walk away. He is the Holy One. Hosea's love for Gomer was a dim, cracked human reflection of this divine love. When Hosea went and paid the price to bring his wife home, he was not acting on the basis of what she deserved. He was acting on the basis of who he was. A man commanded to love as God loves, to forgive as God forgives, to redeem as God redeems. The book ends with a quiet word, almost a whisper. Whoever is wise, let him understand these things. Whoever is discerning, let him know them. For the ways of the Lord are right, and the upright walk in them, but transgressors stumble in them. This story is an invitation to wisdom, to see in this broken, beautiful, costly love of one prophet for one wayward woman, the reflection of an eternal love that will not let go.